Welcome. My name is Iveta Silova, and I'm the director of the Center for Advanced Studies in Global Education at Teachers College. We are really excited to have this, the first this year of the first lecture in our international lecture series that the center organizes in cooperation with EdXchange and Teachers College. And we are very happy and excited to have Professor Pasi Sahlberg joining and opening our first lecture series this year. Pasi Sahlberg is a Finnish educator, author, and scholar. He has worked as school teacher, teacher educator, researcher, policy advisor in Finland, and has studied education systems and reforms around the world. Some of you may know him as the man who invented the germ, but he can tell more about this himself. Pasi has also served the World Bank in Washington, D.C., European Commission in Torino, Italy, OECD as an external expert. His core expertise is in classroom teaching, teacher education, international education policies, educational change, and educational leadership. He has published widely about these topics, including his perhaps most well-known book, Finnish Lessons 2.0, what the world can learn from education change in Finland. This book has been translated in many languages and has won many awards in different countries and with different organizations. Pasi has also worked at the Finland's Ministry of Education and Culture in Helsinki, and he was a visiting professor of practice at Harvard University's Graduate School of Education. He's currently an international speaker and advisor to the governments of Scotland, Sweden, Malta, and Finland, and a visiting scholar at Arizona State University at the United States with us, which we are very excited about. Pasi also serves, he chairs the Open Society Foundation's Global Education Advisory Board, and he is also a member of a number of editorial boards. And maybe I'll mention just a couple of most recent books that are coming up, that are being published. One is called Hard Questions on Global Educational Change, which is published with Teachers College Press and is forthcoming in 2017. And the other one is Empowered Educators in Finland, which is published in Routledge also in 2017. But so I will not delay this much further and invite Pasi to talk about this very timely topic about the alternative facts and urban legends in education. And so please join me in welcoming Pasi.
When the first idea of giving this type of talk and presentation, conversation with you here came about, I was thinking of all sorts of topics. And actually I had a little bit different type of title for this talk. But now when how the world and particularly this country has evolved, I kind of was caught by this term alternative facts. When I was in Washington, D.C., I remember that Washington had facts and true facts. And I never really realized what's the difference between fact and a true fact. Because in Finland we only have facts or myths, and that's it. but here, of course, the world in America is a little bit different thing. And I think I wanted to frame this, the title of this talk this way because the urban legends that are myths and alternative facts are very harmful in education. They're particularly harmful in politics, that you can kind of fabricate or create your own facts and tell the story as you wish. But when these things get into education, they can be very, very harmful. And so what I'm going to do with you is to speak about 3 myths or urban legends about Finnish education. So I have 3 kind of urban legends about us, and then I have 3 alternative facts about you. For those who are thinking about what the heck are the urban legends, they are like this Loch Ness in Scotland, or Bigfoot, or some others that people kind of believe that exist, and some people say that they have seen this. This is a big picture, a so-called photograph of the Nessie in Scotland, but we are not quite sure whether these are true or not. Often these urban legends are just stories. Let me stop here right now and ask you whether you have immediately something in mind that would be an urban legend for you in education, or alternative facts about education here in America or in general.
Public schools are bad.
The public schools are bad. Okay, that's something that people commonly claim to be true. So I'm going to speak about the the Finnish case. And the story of Finland's education started almost exactly 15 years ago, when the OECD for the first time published the results of the Program for International Student Assessment, or PISA as we know it now. Sometimes people, when they introduce me in conferences or speeches like this, they introduce me as Pisa Sahlberg. That is not funny at all, actually. Some people ask if maybe I was the one who invented the whole PISA, because Finland is doing so well in this thing. But before 15 years ago, in the 1990s, nobody really knew too much about education in our country. But it changed very quickly. And since the first PISA study was made public in 2001, in the end of 2001, a lot of stories have evolved from Finland. A lot of theories like what makes an education system perform so differently than education here or in many other countries. And that's where we are right now. And there are three things that I'm going to show you that are part of this evolving story of Finnish education that we need to be very careful. And all of these things are something that people don't always realize that they are actually not true. And I argue that all of these three things are particularly harmful if they are held as true. Okay? So let's see what I have here. First one is this, and many of you probably saw this. This was almost 2 years ago, a newspaper in England, The Independent, that is very highly regarded, trusted daily newspaper in England, had this story within it, that Finland will scrap the school subjects and replace them by topics. Okay? And this journalist who wrote this story came to Finland. He spent there for three days, and he went to schools and spoke to people, and then he came back and he wrote this story. That was probably the editor put this headline to the story, but this became viral over because everybody thought that okay, now Finland has experienced a kind of a declining results in the PISA. Is going to respond to this decline by doing the subjects away. No more math, science, reading, just topics. Kids will just learn and study different things. And I think I received within the first 2 weeks when this was published about maybe 25 contacts from world media all around the world, from Australia and Europe and Latin America, where people wanted to kind of understand what this means. Okay, and for me, this was just a false news, or as people call it, fake news here in America. Okay? Because it's not going to happen. This is not what we are going to do. So we need to be very careful with this. And I have had some people, like serious education policymakers, talking to me and saying that we probably try to do the same as Finland is doing now when you are doing away the subjects. And I said, don't do it because this is not what we're going to do. You have to be very careful with this. So I wrote a response a few weeks after when I realized that somebody has to kind of correct this news to Washington Post that says that no, this is not what we're going to do. Actually, we're going to do much more than that. But that's something that the independent story, nobody else has really not ever reported. And this is the revolution behind this whole thing. It's not that we are not going to have such a strong emphasis on math and reading and science and those other things. But listen to this, what this requirement includes, that requires each and every school in Finland to include one period of study for all the students once a year where the subjects have been integrated into kind of themes or topics. But it can be 1 day, or it can be 1 week, or 1 month, or 3 weeks, or whatever the school wants to do. This requirement includes an idea that this has to be done in collaboration, in engaging students in planning. And this is a revolution if it's done properly. Revolution is not to integrate subjects. You have been doing that for a long time here. But I don't know any other school system that requires that students, even in the primary school, have to be part of the planning and thinking about how do we do this. And also it requires that the children has to be part of has to be engaged and involved in evaluating, assessing what did we learn. And that's going to change everything in the school if it's done in an appropriate way. But nobody has ever reported these things. They're just kind of interested in this integration and doing away the subjects. So we have to be very mindful. And if you if you have an education minister who said that we want to do what Finland is doing with this, I said, don't focus on the integration, just focus on engaging the students in deciding what to do, giving them more voice in the school, particularly in the middle school and high school, so that the students would really think about what is important to study and what are the best ways to study those things. So that's the kind of a fact, that's the kind of a truth behind this thing when it comes to Finland. Many countries are now considering doing the same thing without knowing that this is not what Finland will be doing. And the other one is the idea of homework. The homework is a big issue here in America, right? People believe that the more you do homework, the better you do in school, right? Okay, and I've been in a communities and schools where they have a 2-hour homework standard that every child every night has to do at least 2 hours homework. And somehow, we have this idea about Finnish school system that there's no homework there. Have you heard about this? Many people, when I've been hosting delegations coming to Finland, they say that we came to see the school system where kids don't have no homework. I said, where did you get the idea from? And they said they just read it somewhere or heard it somewhere. Many of them got the idea from this film. I'm going to show you this short, brief episode so you can sit back and relax and fasten your seatbelts and take a look at this. This is from Michael Moore's film, Where to Invade Next. How many of you have seen that film before? Okay, so if you have seen this, you have seen this episode. Or for those who haven't seen, even if you have seen this, take a look at this as if this was the only thing you have ever seen or heard about Finnish education system. And then think about what is the image, what is my kind of idea, understanding about what the Finns are doing and why they're doing so well in the school. I'll speak a little bit about Michael Moore's kind of understanding as a filmmaker about this thing. But I think that this has been very kind of a problematic way of presenting what Finland is doing. Are you ready for this?
So here's what happened. Back in the day, Finland's schools sucked on the level that ours suck on. When they tested the world's kids, both Finland and us were usually about the same, somewhere down the list of nations. But Finland didn't like that. So they tried some new ideas, and in no time, Finland shot to the top of the world. Their students were number one. How did they do that? That was the one question I wanted an answer to, and I went straight to see the enemy's Minister of Education. Before I could say anything, she blurted out their top secret.
They do not have homework.
Wait, so you reduced the homework you give them in school?
Yes. They should have more time to be kids, to be youngsters, to enjoy the life.
How many hours of homework did you get last night?
About 10 minutes or something.
10 minutes of homework.
Yeah. Maybe 15 minutes or 20 minutes.
20 minutes, about 20 minutes. Yeah.
Well, if I would have done the homework, I think it would be like 10 minutes tops.
Usually I don't really do homework that much.
The whole term, homework, is kind of obsolete, I think. In that way,
Your homework is obsolete.
yeah, in that way that these kids, they have a lot other things to do after school.
Like what?
Like being together, like being with the family, like doing sports, like playing music, like reading.
So they have no homework. What if all they want to do is climb a tree?
They could climb a tree. Yeah, they can climb a tree, then they don't come to climb a tree. But they end up, while climbing the tree, probably finding out about different insects, and they can come to the school next day telling me about what they've done.
Compared to the older kids, how many hours a day do the younger ones go to school?
Mondays 3 hours, Tuesdays 4 hours. It varies. It's 20 hours a week.
So they're, oh man. Now, does this 3 or 4 hours of school include the lunch hour?
Yes.
How are they learning anything? How are you getting anything done?
Your brain has to relax every now and then. If you just constantly work, then you stop learning. And there's no use of doing that for a long period of time.
Finland students have the shortest school days and the shortest school years in the entire Western world. They do better by going to school less.
Did you
How many languages do you speak?
English, yeah, Swedish, Spanish.
Finnish and Swedish. Finnish, English and German.
French, German,
Finnish and English.
English, Swedish, and French and Spanish.
So you were an exchange student in the U.S.?
Yeah.
When you got back here in school, what did you notice that you felt relieved about?
No more multiple choice exams. They
No multiple choice exams here?
or very few of them, if any. Because all of my exams in the
How
US.
do you answer the question right if it isn't listed as one of the 4 choices?
Your answer.
You have to know it, actually.
Yeah.
You actually have to know it.
Yeah.
If there was one thing I heard over and over again from the Finns, it was that America should stop teaching to a standardized test.
Get rid of those standardized tests.
National testing.
Standardized tests.
Standardized testings.
What you are teaching your students is to do well on those tests, and you're not really teaching them anything.
No, we are teaching them how to flunk a test, and then a bunch of schools fail the test, and those schools are turned into charter schools, and then somebody makes a lot of money.
But school is about finding your happiness, finding a way to learn what makes you happy.
They figured out about 1/3 of the school time the students are in school is spent preparing for the standardized test. And so they've eliminated a lot of things that aren't on the test. So music is gone, art is gone, poetry is gone. Yeah, in many schools.
Civics isn't even on the test, so now schools are growing.
Really?
Civics, yes. Civics, American civics.
Okay. Unbelievable.
We got rid of poetry.
Really?
Yeah.
Why?
It's a waste of time. When are they ever going to learn? When are they ever going to speak as poets when they're adults? How does that help them get a job?
We try to teach them everything that they need so that they could actually use their brain as well as they can, including PE, including arts, including music, anything that can actually make brain work better.
The children need to be baking, they should be singing, they should be doing art and going on nature walks and doing all these things because there's this very short time that they're allowed to be children.
If you don't have standardized tests here in Finland, how do you know which schools are the best? And, people need a list.
The neighborhood school is the best school. It is not different than the school which can be, for example, situated in the town center, because all the schools in Finland, they are all equal.
When we move to a new city, we never ask where the best school is. It's never a question.
So nobody has to shop for schools.
There's nothing different in any of our schools. They are the same.
It is illegal in Finland to set up a school and charge tuition. That's why, for the most part, private schools don't exist. And what that means is that the rich parents have to make sure that the public schools are great. And by making the rich kids go to school with everyone else, they grow up with those other kids as friends. And when they become wealthy adults, they have to think twice before they screw them over.
In the United States, education is a business. There are corporations making money. Here, it's so student-centered that when we had to redo our playground, they had the architects come in and talk to the kids.
Were they listened to?
Yes, there are things on our playgrounds that the students really wanted.
Being in school here is more independent.
We're treated more like adults than in the United States.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't need a whole pass to go to the bathroom during class.
Yeah.
We'll see students commuting on the subway, even as young as 7, and they're going on their own to school.
When I started doing teacher training practice back in the US, I was in these certain neighborhoods teaching these kids and telling them, you can be anything you want to be when you grow up. This is kind of a lie. And when I came to Finland, a lot of my teaching is based on what the kids want and what they see for their future. So it doesn't feel so false to say you can really be whatever you want to be when you grow up, because they're making it happen already. They already have such power.
That's upsetting. So think about that. That our kids don't have that. That's really beautiful.
It's not that we have figured out something that nobody else has done in education. That's wrong. Many of these things that have made Finland perform well in education are initially American ideas.
We try to teach them to think for themselves and to be critical to what they're learning.
We try to teach them to be happy person, to respect others and respect yourself.
You're concerned with their happiness.
Oh yeah,
What the hell do you teach?
I teach math.
So the math teacher says that the first thing out of your mouth of what you wanted these students to get out of school was to be happy, have a happy life.
Yeah.
And you're the math teacher.
Yeah.
When do they have their time to play and socialize with their friends and grow as human beings? Because there's so much more life around than just school.
We want them to play.
I want children to play.
And that was the principle.
You're planting the American flag right here in the middle of your school and claiming this great idea for us.
Thanks for steering it.
Yeah, that's how we roll it.
All right.
Most difficulty I have with this episode, there are a lot of things that are fine, way to tell the story. But the thing that we wouldn't have any homework is not true, even if our minister said that. Actually, she was fired right after this film was out, not because of the things he said, but that's not true to say that we are having no homework. These students that you see there telling that they do 10 minutes and 20 minutes, I'm quite sure that Michael and the team kind of selected those students who say that they are doing little homework. I can take you, if you come to Finland, I'll take you to see the schools where students say that they spend every day 1 hour with the homework or 45 minutes, much more than you heard there, which is not true. It's also false to say that the school years, Finland has the shortest school years in the world. That's not true. Not even the shortest school days. So, the problem I have, I appreciate a lot of work that Michael Moore does, and otherwise this film is great. I don't know how true the other parts of the story are, but if you make mistakes with the basic facts in one or two places in this type of story, I have questions of how accurate the whole image is actually, and that's why I find it. All of those people who have seen this film, they kind of leave the cinema or the screen by saying that, okay, it's wonderful, but we should also abolish homework because Finns are not doing this. I think what is the key with this homework thing is not how many minutes you do it, but how meaningful, how closely related that is to what you're trying to learn in a school. And I was teaching math for many years, and I can tell you one thing, if there are math teachers in this room, there's absolutely no way that you can learn mathematics without doing homework. It just don't happen. You need to take some time, sometimes more than some other times. But you have to practice, you have to rehearse some of those things. And it's probably the same with the foreign languages and some other things, that you need to do your practice. And this idea that you can learn everything in school, you don't need to do any practice, I think it's a harmful thing if people take it further. Then the third one, and I've been facing this idea of the best and the brightest here in the United States when people talk about Finnish school system. Especially this is related to teachers. There are many people who say that we are here in the United States, that we are kind of implementing this or using the same principle of having the best and brightest to teach because it's inspired by what Finland is doing. And I started to think about this about 5 years ago, when some people even claim that if here in the United States, if you only had the teachers like we have in Finland, everything would be fine. Forget all the poverty and all those social issues. It's all about great teachers. And I think that's not really as it is. So you see this, the best and the brightest idea. This was what the Arne Duncan, your previous secretary, was saying. He was actually literally speaking about the best and the brightest into the teaching profession, endorsing that thing. And this is what your current Secretary for Education is saying, that she's also speaking about the best and the brightest logic in education in general, as if it was about the human capital or skills of our teachers. What I'm going to show you now is trying to prove that, first of all, that in Finland we don't think like this, and secondly, that when you think about the teaching profession, that it's not necessarily the best way to think about improving the quality of teaching or quality of teachers by just, having a systems that select the academically most able and talented young people into teaching. That's my point here. So I'm going to show it to you this way. And this first figure is just to kind of tries to understand where this idea is coming from, that Finland would be doing that, and some other countries as well as Singapore. What you see here is the number of applicants since year 2000 into our primary school teacher education programs in Finland. And we have 8 research universities that prepare primary school teachers. They all have to study master's degree. There's no other way to do that. And we don't have Teach for Finland or any of these arrangements that would allow young people to come and spend some time in Finnish schools and teach and then go and do something real. So you will see that the number during the last 5 years, we have had about 8,000 or 8,500 applicants into these 8 universities programs. And all these universities are public universities. We don't have any private universities. Students don't pay anything, so it's all free of charge, free of tuition. And every year about 800 students are accepted. Okay? So if you look at this 800 vis-a-vis the 8,000, it roughly corresponds with this idea of, the 10% are accepted every year. That's about the ratio nationally. Okay? So some people could just by looking at this, you can say that, okay, Finland is selecting the future teachers from the top 10% of the applicants, right? This is what would be a normal way of admitting these students into the programs. But let me show you something, and this is one university. This is not a national picture. This is just one university, University of Helsinki, that is the largest university in Finland, preparing teachers, including primary school teachers. And what I've done here is to break down the academic talent of students into deciles. So you see here that these are the students whose high school exit examination points are between 1 and 10. So those are very poor students in terms of how well they did or poorly they did in the matriculation or final examination. Here you have the top 10% of the students, those who are really, really smart and got the best points, and everything in between. And of course now if it was right that in Finnish system we are looking for these best and the brightest, the most talented students, the pool is so large that we could easily take 100% of the successful applicants from here that we have available. So in 2014, 3 years ago, where this data comes from, there were 2,300 applicants into this one university primary school teacher education program. So the students have to apply there, and it's a very complicated, several phases of admission before they are accepted, and 120 were accepted. It's the same this year, exactly the same number. And again, now this 120 out of 2,300 is so small number that basically this 120 could be taken from this top 10%, right? So I'm going to show you now what is the distribution of talent in this cohort, 2014. So these are the students that are third-year students now in Helsinki when they're studying. This is how it looks like, what it looked like 3 years ago. So the 1/4 of the students who were accepted that year come from the top 20%, okay? So that's the best and the brightest part of if you understand it as academic talent. Same number, 1/4 of the students came from the bottom half. And more than half, or roughly half of the students are just the average students. So why do you think the university will accept so many 30 students from this bottom half of the academic pool? These students often have fairly low scores in math and reading, foreign languages and others. But why they are accepted to become teachers? Or who are they? If you're very good in mathematics, if you're really talented in math, it's probably difficult for you to understand why some kids don't learn mathematics. But there's a particular group of people here, and I've been admitting these students for many years at this university, and many of them are athletes. They have been coaching basketball or football or ice hockey, or they're musicians or artists or community people doing work with the other young people, and they have a skill how to make people do things that they don't always like to do. I remember one person who didn't have very high scores in a high school leaving examination. When we were asking him that what makes you a good teacher, he said that I know how to make young people do things that they don't like to do. Because I was coaching football, I can't remember exactly what it was, but he said that he has been a coach, and he knows how to make boys or girls run in the rain or snow when you have to do that. And that's exactly what we need to have with teachers sometimes. That you need teachers who have the skill how to encourage people to do these things. So, I was part of this pool probably because I was singer in a rock and roll band, and I was playing basketball and other things. So I went to school, but I didn't do too many things there. But I still, I applied to this very same program twice. I failed twice. I tried once, I didn't get in. I tried another time, they didn't accept me. So I often say now that I was not good enough to become a primary school teacher in Finland, so I ended up teaching at Harvard University School of Education instead. And I have a lot of friends who tell the same story, that they wanted to become primary school teachers in Finland, and because they couldn't do that, now they're doing something different. So that's the my kind of a theory here is that if you're really interested in finding right people in your teacher education program, your theory of action that is looking at the best and the brightest pool is not necessarily the best one, because they are, certainly in this country and many other countries, there are potentially great teachers in this pool here. And so we have to have a selection system that is offering an opportunity to young people to try. And if you emphasize too much, I think the problem here is that if you emphasize too much the fact that teaching is also only for those who have high SAT scores, then many of those kids who are doing other things, sports or arts or whatever it is, they don't even try because they know that I'm not good enough to do that. So that's how the Finnish system is really working. So why should we care about these three urban legends in Finland? Why they are important or significant? So let me have a little break here, just a half a minute. I'll take a little water, and I would ask you to turn to your neighbor just for half a minute and answer this question. Why do you think this is important? Why should we care? Okay. Now, if you want to have my opinion, I know that all of you have your own. Why should we care about those things? But I have been around in this situation for many years now. When I have a privilege to meet the very high-level legislators and policymakers and education ministers and others. And sometimes when I hear people saying that we want to do what Finland is doing, or Singapore, or some other countries, without really understanding what they're doing, I can see a huge risk there, that they can adopt or insist wrong type of policies in their systems and justify those things by evidence, saying that the evidence from this country will prove or support this thing. And that's why I think we need to get these things absolutely right. Now, let me move to the others. This is the second half of my talk here, and the third half of my talk is about a few conclusions to this. So what are the urban legends here in the United States? And I feel a little bit humble because David is here, because you would do this much better than I do. But I take my kind of I use this opportunity to speak to you as an alien immigrant here right now, somebody who is not a member of the nation or community here, but somebody who loves your country and cares about what you do, and particularly is concerned about the future of your children. And that's why I think I have a right also to say what I think. But you can ignore these things, or you can say that I'm completely wrong, that's fine. But this is how I see some of these three alternative facts or urban legends here in the United States. And let's see what you think. So, the first one is, and this is a very common, and this is again what David in his book has very eloquently addressed in a different ways, is that American education school system is bad, somewhere there, and it's very, very expensive. Yeah, you have heard about that, right? That internationally compared, you are doing very badly, and you are spending a lot of money in the education. Have you heard about that? If you haven't, I'm going to play it to you once again. And this is your current president. And I was particularly interested in when the election campaign was on from both sides of the aisle to see what the candidates are speaking about education. What are the kind of educational issues that they are addressing? And as you know, that there was not very much. It was about the college and, free college for everybody or not. But other than that, people were talking about all sorts of other things like emails and, that stuff. I think we should have been hearing some other things. But there was something, and this is your current president's campaign website, where he had a little thing on what to do with the American education. And I'm going to play you this. It's not going to be 8 minutes. It's going to be 30 seconds, because you don't really need more than 30 seconds to say what he has to say. Listen to this.
Do you know, in the world today, we're ranked number 30. Number 30. So we're at the bottom of the list, and yet per pupil, we pay the most. You look at other countries, Denmark, Sweden, China, Norway. These are countries that are right at the top, and they spend much less money than us. So we're going local. It's going to be great, and we're going to spend less money, and we're going to move up that list very, very rapidly.
Okay. It's a very short assessment of American education. And now, let's see what we heard. First, we heard that the quality of the system, the students are performing, you are in the bottom of the list, right? Somewhere there, number 30, and that you are spending much more money than anybody else. They were mentioned Sweden, Norway, and Denmark, and China, that are the best systems of education in the world. And then the strategy to fix American education was to go local and cut spending and do these things. And you got very quickly, America will be great again in education, right? Okay, so this requires a kind of a reality check, I think, whether this is correct. Let me show you something, how I would respond to this, or what I was thinking when I heard this. Well, first of all, there's a lot of evidence available globally, so this is not an impossible thing to check. So it's actually very easy to go to the, open your internet and Google this thing. That takes about half a minute to find something like this. This data is from the OECD's Education at a Glance, the last version that is about 6 months old. So this is the latest data that we have available from 2015. Okay, so here you see United States when we look at the public expenditure to primary to higher education as percentage of your national wealth. Okay, so this is what you see here is that what proportion of your national wealth in this country and other countries you spend and we spend on education. Okay, so this is kind of a relative figure over there. This is United States here. So you will see that you are below the EU and OECD average here. So this is the OECD, 35 OECD countries on average are here. And those countries that were mentioned, Norway, Denmark, Finland, and Sweden over there. You will see that proportionally they spend much more on education than the United States. Okay, so there's no room to argue based on this evidence that education would be the most expensive in the world. You're actually below the average spending. If you don't like this one, there's another way to look at this, and we can see how, in actual terms, how much money in this country and other countries are spent on educating students from primary to higher education. Higher education is not included here. So this is the primary school, junior high school, and high school. So here you see that this is the United States. It looks a little bit different, but still countries like Norway, Denmark, Sweden, and Finland are over there. So this again shows that compared to those countries that were mentioned, education in the United States is not the most expensive in the world. So this cost thing is not really correct. If you ask me, I would say that being one of the wealthiest countries in the world, that you would have probably room for spending more on education to make things look a little bit different. At least you cannot argue that you are already spending more than anybody else. I think the question really is that how do you spend the money, where the money is going, and whether it's doing the right thing. One of the interesting things is that when I travel around the United States and ask this question where the money goes, where the education money goes, the $600 billion a year in America, nobody seems to know. Even if you are a senator or legislator in the state or Washington, D.C., nobody has been able to give me a kind of a clear figure where the money flows. So the question is that are you really spending money in the right way that would make difference in helping children's lives? So the money thing is problematic. Your president is not really having the facts correctly. Then we can look at the two other things that I think are important when it comes to education. One is the quality of outcomes, student achievement, how well kids are learning, reading, math, and science that are included in these international studies, and equity that is here. And this equity that I show you here in a horizontal line, simply for those who are not familiar with the equity, what the equity in education means, there are different ways to look at this. But what it means here is that it's looking at the strength of the relationship between family background and achievement in school. In other words, if you have a system of education where students' home background, where they come from, their parents' occupation and education and wealth in the family, if it determines the children's learning in school, then of course we are looking at a system that has less equity. Okay? But if the family background has less influence in learning in school, then the equity is stronger. And that's how, interestingly, now this international data is allowing us to also compare countries' education systems in terms of how equitable they are, right? So now, if America is here in this zone, it means that you have a double trouble. You have an issue with equity and quality as well. So you're below average, international average in those two variables. Here you have more quality, you have better than average learning outcomes on average nationally, but your issue is with equity. Here you have strong equity, but lower quality because you are below there, and that green area is where everybody would like to be, right? That's where you have simultaneously more equity and better learning outcomes than internationally average. Now, my question for you here is that most of you are Americans, and all of you know this education system very well. Now, if there was, let's think for a moment, if there was a thing called American school system, that all of us, we know that doesn't really exist, because you have 50 states and more than 14,000 districts and 100,000 schools, so there's a lot of local subsystems in the United States. But still, this is how the media and politicians and the OECD uses the data. If there was a thing called American schools education system, where do you think United States of America is according to the latest OECD data from this last December? Think about it for a moment. If you don't know, you can just give you a wild guess based on what you think or what you have read or what you've seen in the Fox News. Somewhere, but where? Somewhere here. Okay, and how far would you go? Somewhere here. Okay, how about others? Left, somewhere here. More left. Here? Somewhere there, okay? Now, let me take these things away, and I'm going to show you where, according to the OECD, again, this is open to your comments and questions if you think that this is absolutely wrong, but this is the only evidence we have about equity and quality compared to other countries here in the United States. Of course, your national research and statistics are very different, but this is what the OECD is showing. Now, raise your hand if you are a little bit surprised, because there are always people who think that this cannot be true. The interesting thing here is that, first of all, you are very close to international average with both of these things. But there was a progress since the last study 3 years ago in the United States, because you used to be 3 years ago, United States was here. So you have moved a little bit like this, But nobody was reporting this. The only news I saw in this country is that things are going horribly bad. And actually that's not true, because you have improved a little bit. I don't know how much it is and whether it fits into kind of a statistical, the margin of error of these measurements. But there's no way to say that you are doing worse than you did 3 years ago or 6 years ago. Actually, I would say that something has happened. And the interesting question is for all of those who are researchers here in this room, that if this is right, if America has been able to enhance equity of the system, why is it? Is it because of your more systematic way of supporting children who need more help? Or in some parts of the country, giving funding and support for communities and schools that are struggling more? I don't know. But it's an interesting question here. So again, to your president, this should be a kind of a sign to say that, folks, we are not great yet, but we are getting better. We are slowly doing things better. Thank you, Barack Obama, for doing this. He probably wouldn't say that, but I would. Anyway, this is United Kingdom, not very much different than you. And then we have Canada. Are there any Canadians in the room? Anybody from Canada? Good. Now everybody should raise your hands. I'm a Canadian because the education is doing. I think the world needs more Canada anyway. In many ways. I don't know what's happening today in Washington D.C. when Trudeau is there having a talks, but I'm sure that he's saying the same thing. The world needs more Canada, particularly when it comes to education. Let's just look at this. It's amazing. The Canada is a system where they have been able to, across the provinces, most of them, not all of them, but most of them are within this circle here, whether it's Ontario or BC or Quebec or Alberta, Saskatchewan, they're all there. And it's Canada is so similar to you. They speak the same language. They watch the same TV, drive the same cars. They go to McDonald's every now and then, like you do. But they still do things in education very, very differently. Canada is so good that I said Canada is an educational heaven. This little cloud is heaven. If you want to do well in education, try to go there. And the other nations are there. This is Estonia, this is Japan, and this is Finland, according to the latest study. So there are four members in heaven. There's seat for one more. So who is going to be the one? But don't implement anything like race to the top, because race to the top is not going to take you there, as you know. And here are the others, the other systems. This is Norway, Denmark, Sweden is here. It's very close to the United States. The Netherlands, Italy. Look at this. This is Chile, Slovakia, Mexico, Luxembourg, Greece, Turkey. Is this Mexico here? Yeah. This is Hungary. Is this one? So, just take a look at this. That you are average when it comes to education. Not bad, not great, but somewhere there in the middle, which is a very different situation. If the United States, if you were here, then of course you could speak about Sputnik moment or something like this, that you have a state of emergency, you have to do something radically different or think differently about education. So again, all of those who are in the business of research and statistics here, you see, if you look at these countries here, that there seems to be some type of correlation. Normally the correlation regression is a line, but for me it's a stairway, because it's like a stairway to heaven. If you remember this song?
There's a lady who's sure all that glitters is gold, and she's buying a stairway.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Remember this, 1974 or something like this. Yeah, it's nice. One of my favorite tunes, by the way. So here are those that we can see that in this country people often envy. Hong Kong is the only one who is in heaven of these cities. Singapore, and then China now, that has 4 jurisdictions included there. But just look at Singapore, very high performer in learning outcomes, but huge issues with equity. Because in Singapore, if you want to be that good in school, you have to go to school twice a day. During the day, the normal public school, and then in the evening, you go to the private tutoring. And if you don't have money to do that, you can also only hire a poor, low-quality tutor. Okay? If you are wealthy, you can hire a very high-quality tutor. That's how the game works, and that's why Singapore and China both have these issues. So one thing we can take away from this, of course, again, going back to the president's statement, assessment about your education system is that you are not number 30 in the list, and you are definitely not number 30 in equity here, that you are not, you are somewhere there in the middle, that for me is a world of difference when it comes to education policy. So thinking about what to do next. It's not about fixing the system, it's about improving or developing it. Then the second one here in the United States that I often hear is that the students are studying less. You heard this in Michael Moore's documentary. And just quickly, let's take a look at this. If you see, again, this is the OECD latest data from 6 months ago. And this is the United States here. And these are important numbers here, because this will show you how many years of education is included in this kind of a compulsory label here. So United States has one of the largest numbers of required instruction for primary and lower secondary students, just before kids go to high school in the world. So your students, they already have a lot of instruction time in the school system, even if your number of school days in a yearly calendar is about 180. Okay, so there's no room to argue that you would need shorter summer holidays or longer school years or school days. The time is there, but now the question is that how do you spend the time? This is where Finland is. Look at Finland over there. Michael was right that we have a much less. This difference between Finland and the United States is about 2 years by the time when kids go to high school. In Finland, kids go to school when they're 7 years old. So we have relatively less instruction time for children before they go to high school compared to the United States. So there's no room to argue that the time is an issue here in the United States, whether it's about students or teachers. Teachers in America also teach much more than they do in Finland or many other countries, according to the same statistics. Then the third one that I often hear, and each of you here know, is that America, you cannot compare America to Finland, right? You have 320 million people here, a lot of diversity, different languages and cultures. Finland has 6 million people, 2 languages, official languages, and very kind of a homogeneous society compared to many others. But that's not the point here. There are different type of differences that we can take a look at. And I'm going to show you this, my last slide here, and then I will close and open this for conversation. And this is quite interesting. So what I'm showing you here is this is about the political empowerment of women. So percentage of women in parliament last year. Okay, so this includes your November elections. Okay, so we are looking at how many percent of your congressmen and women are actually women here. 20% is here, 45%. There are very few countries that have more than 45% of female, close to the gender balance. And this is the mother index. If you have heard about the mother index, this is the Save the Children that is doing every Mother's Day in May, is publishing this survey or comparison of different countries, and they look at how good or poor countries are to be a mother. So it looks at the healthcare and early childhood and prenatal care for families and parental leave, mother's education, many other things, and then combines those things and calculates an index here that allows them to rank order countries from the best to the worst. Where do you think the United States of America is? Okay. So this is the percentage of women in parliament, and when you go from here to up, your country improves as a place to be a mother. Now, take a look at this, because that's where we are very, very different. This is where the United States is. Yeah, you have barely 20%, just increased it just a little bit in this last election, the proportion of women in political power in this country. And according to the Mother Index, you are one of the last ones there. One of the worst countries to be a mother, according to Save the Children Index. This is where Finland is. And that's what makes the difference. We have a lot of women in our parliament. Many of them are teachers, by the way, educators. And that brings a number one, or I think Finland is now number 2 in the world in terms of to be a mother. The country gives 14 months paid parental leave for mothers and fathers. You can stay home for first 3 years of your child's since your child's birth. Universal daycare for all the children, and so on. And here are the others. So if you look at this correlation is huge between these 2 variables: the political empowerment of women and place to be a mother. So if you want to improve conditions for families and mothers and young children, vote more women to power. That will change gradually things. Sweden, Iceland, Norway, Denmark, Netherlands, Belgium, all those countries have a very different policies. And of course, if you have the good starting for your children when they're young, the first 3-4 years, through healthcare and early childhood programs and many others, and taking care of the parents, of course, it will give everybody a better start to do well also in education. Extremely important part of the thing. And that's why I often tell here that we are very different, but we are different in some of the areas that are more significant than just how many people do we have or how many different cultures we have. Of course, those things are important, but this is what is important. So why should we care? So why this is important? Of course, if you don't get your facts right here, then you are in the business of fixing the system or doing away everything that you have done and bringing something new rather than developing. I think in the United States it's particularly important to understand the difference between these 2. Developing is a different logic than fix the system. When I look at your educational performance, if it's correct, I see that you should be in the business of developing, improving the system, helping schools and teachers and communities to do better with their children and with education, rather than bringing new solutions and new innovations and ideas that have no evidence whatsoever to work. The other one is the difference between quantity and quality of learning. Again, by asking teachers and children to do more of the same things in your school system doesn't make any sense. I think here in the United States you could consider how do you deal with this quantity part of the equation here. In other words, what do you do with the time that you have in your school? My recommendation often here has been that make sure that every child, every student has a right to have 15 minutes recess of every hour, the time that they spend in the school, just like they do in Finland and some other countries. And that would make a world of difference. It doesn't cost anything, but recess is part of this thing. It would decrease a little bit the quantity of the time in the classroom, but not decrease the time in the school, and would make a huge difference. And then the school and the society. Again, Gustavo and David and others, you have been doing a wonderful work here in trying to understand the role of the poverty and out-of-school factors in education. We know that teachers only have about 10 to 15% in explaining the variation of the students' test scores. So it's not about school and teachers, it's about all sorts of other things outside of the school and society. And this is where Finland is particularly doing well by taking care of the families and children. So let me conclude here and give you 3 things to maybe talk about or respond to this if you wish, that I would like to take away. The first of all is that when I look around what we are doing, particularly in the field of education, is that we are not so much anymore discovering things. And this is what the politics and policies in education are doing. People are downloading stuff. It's so easy to go to the internet and just get the stuff and then create the policies as you wish. Any policy can be evidence-based. I've seen this firsthand around the world, that you can set the policy now if you're an education leader, and then you can cherry-pick the evidence for that. Okay? Or even worse, you can produce evidence first by conducting a study or research that will then support your policy that you wanted to do. And it's a very different ball game that we used to have 20 years ago, because now it's a commonly happening around the world. And I think finally that the research community in most countries, probably all of the countries, have to react firmly into this thing. We cannot say anymore that more research. Just wait for our research studies and we will help you to improve or develop these things. We have to behave and act differently. Also, the research community, I think, in this country, and you have been doing that, I know, have to make sure that the people have the facts right. Okay? But how do you do that is a different thing. How do you communicate these things in a different way? I think it's a good idea to make sure that all the students that are growing in ASU and Finland and other places will be equipped with these tools and skills to communicate these things in a powerful way. I have much less faith in traditional research papers and journal articles that I used to have when I was younger. Now, if you think about influencing what the policies and politicians think about, we have to find some other ways and other means to communicate. Thank you so much.